Hello guys, it's Katie and welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm going to be sharing with you guys how to get started writing your own crochet patterns as well as my full process for designing a crochet pattern. So for today's video, first off I want to mention this is my first time filming on my new camera, so I apologize if things look different. I'm still trying to learn the camera and get used to things, so bear with me on that. But like I said, today's video is going to be my tips for starting to design and write your own crochet patterns. And then after that, we'll get into my full process of designing a crochet pattern. And you guys are going to see me fully designing one of my newest patterns. First off, I want to share with you my tips and different things that I think you should know going into designing crochet patterns. And then we're going to get into actually writing up the pattern. So first, you want to practice crocheting with lots of different patterns from different designers to learn different sorts of stitches and techniques, and in general to figure out how you like patterns to be written. So for example, if you are just starting out with crocheting, of course you probably don't have a lot of experience with different types of patterns and different types of projects. I recommend having a decent amount of experience with the way different patterns are written, just to of course be familiar with different ways different patterns are written and to figure out what style of writing patterns you enjoy most. A good way to start, instead of just trying to fully jump into freehanding a pattern for the first time, you can start by modifying someone else's pattern to have something different about it. Now, one thing about this is just because you modify somebody else's pattern does not mean it is your own and you're able to release it and all of that stuff. So don't do that, please. But in general, to practice for designing your own pattern, I think it is a good idea to start modifying. That's how I got started, and I'm pretty sure a lot of designers get started that way as well, is just by going ahead and changing a few things about another pattern to make it look maybe a little different, or just so that it's maybe easier for you or something like that. And that way you will kind of get the idea of how the structure of a pattern works and just learn things from changing other patterns before you fully dive headfirst into going ahead and writing your own patterns. Now next, you obviously need to come up with creative and unique ideas. Of course, you don't want to be copying somebody else. So of course, make sure you do research and try to make sure the pattern is something that hasn't already been done before. Now of course, for certain types of like animals, like a teddy bear or something like that, a lot of people have done patterns on that. So in general, it's not necessarily copying somebody else unless you actually like see their picture and fully base yours off of that, then of course that's a problem. But for certain things, everybody's going to make those certain types of animals and certain types of things. So just keep in mind that be respectful of somebody else's design and don't fully just try to make your own pattern off of what somebody else's item looks like. Come up with some sort of idea, either based off of something you've seen in real life or something that you have this idea in your head. Just try to come up with some sort of idea that is creative and unique that hopefully nobody else has done before. Now next is the fact that it takes a lot of trial and error when it comes to designing crochet patterns. You guys are going to see this in my second portion of this video where I am actually designing a pattern. It takes a ton of frogging your stitches to figure out how you want something to look. You may have to frog the whole entire project and do it multiple times before you even figure out the way you want it to look. And still, once you finish the design, you may not be 100% happy with it, and you may end up doing it a couple more times after that. And unfortunately, that's really what pattern designing is all about. So even if you do want to design patterns, you have to know that that is a part of the process, and it is okay. Don't get frustrated as you're starting out designing just because you have to redo things multiple times. One thing that kind of goes along with that is just that designing is not for everybody, and that is okay. Because of how long it takes and the trial and error and all of that, it is sometimes not for everybody. There are people that are able to crochet for multiple years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever, and they don't have the desire to design crochet patterns at all. And then there's people that have only crocheted for maybe like a month or even less, and they want to design crochet patterns. It's completely up to you. There's no specific, oh, you should crochet for this amount of time or anything like that before you start designing. It is just up to you whether you want to actually try designing or not. And if you do try it out and you decide it isn't for you, that's okay too. Alright, now on to actually writing up the pattern, which this part is if you plan to release the pattern. So if you want to actually be like a full-on pattern designer where you sell patterns on Etsy or on Ribbler or on Ravelry or whatever platform, or you just make free crochet patterns on your blog or on Ribbler or wherever, this is the process that you need to do for actually writing up the pattern. So first, as you are designing the pattern, you want to make sure that you write everything down in detail that you are doing as you are crocheting. That way, if it's either been like a day or multiple months after, you still know what you were talking about because you took detailed notes when you were designing the pattern, so you're able to release it where it still makes sense for other people to use the pattern, or in general, it still makes sense for you to use it in the future if you want to. Now, next is you should go through and make the pattern a second time or maybe even more times to make sure that the pattern makes sense. Now, there's either that option of making the pattern multiple times yourself, or you can get pattern testers. A lot of people gravitate towards pattern testers, which you can do pattern tester calls through Instagram. I do them quite often, and you guys are able to test my patterns if you would like to. People also do them through Ribbler and other different social media platforms. So in general, if you would like to start out with designing, another good thing is applying for tester calls and actually being a tester for somebody's crochet pattern. That way you get kind of a behind the scenes of what a pattern looks like in kind of the rough draft form, and you give the designer notes on the pattern for how they can improve it, if there's any typos, anything like that. And being a tester for a pattern will also kind of help you with the design process, I think, because you'll also get to talk to a designer and help them with their own design. So that's also a good idea if you want to look into that for practice for designing your own patterns. And if you do want to design your own patterns in the future, you'll also get an idea of how tester calls work, so you can do them yourself in the future when you have your own designs. Next, which is probably something you should actually do beforehand, before you are looking for pattern testers, and that is just to finalize the pattern with appropriate abbreviations, notes, pictures, video tutorials, anything else that you want to include in your pattern. You should have all of that included before you send it to your testers, or before you even do a tester call, just to make sure that the pattern is basically completely finished and the testers are just looking over it to make sure everything makes sense, make sure all the math is correct, make sure that the stitch count is correct, make sure that there's no typos in like your wording. All of that stuff is what the pattern testers are for. So you want to go ahead and finalize the pattern with everything beforehand. And if you have gone through and done like I mentioned earlier and used patterns from a lot of different designers, like I said, you will learn what you like to be included in patterns and what you think maybe isn't super necessary, and you will learn to incorporate that in your own patterns. And everybody has a different style of writing patterns. Every single pattern you use by a different designer is going to be just a little bit different. So in general, you just have to learn that for yourself. Like I said earlier, from using other designers' patterns, and in general, just from trial and error of what works for yourself. And my final thing is how to price your patterns if you are selling them. So if you're selling your patterns, there's obviously multiple different ways to price them. I would first recommend going on Etsy or Ravelry or wherever you're planning to sell your crochet patterns, and go through and look at what other designers are selling their crochet patterns at. And base your prices on that, because of course you don't want your patterns to be way more expensive than other designers, and you don't want them to be way cheaper than other designers. You want it to be in the same price range as other people that are making the same type of patterns as you. So if you're making amigurumi, then of course you want to look through other designers that are making amigurumi. If you're making crochet clothing patterns, then you want to look through other people that are making crochet clothing patterns. Just to get an idea. Of course you don't have to price your items the same price as everybody else, but in general that is a good way to get an idea, as well as you also can price them based off of how long the design took you to make or how big the finished item will be. So example, for my shop, for my Squishmallow patterns, I price those at $4.99 per pattern because they are a bigger item. When they are finished, it is a lot bigger than some of my other patterns. And then some of my other patterns that are smaller, like the more recent no-sew ones that I've released, that are like items that take only 30 minutes or less to make, those patterns are a lot cheaper because of course they are smaller items once they are finished. So that's also something that I like to do, is base it off of how big the finished item is going to be. And now the final thing, once you have determined all of that, is also deciding where you want to publish your crochet patterns. So I definitely recommend Ribbler as a first site for publishing your patterns for anybody, because they make it super easy for you to publish your own crochet patterns. They also make it super easy for people using your crochet patterns, so I definitely recommend Ribbler. If you haven't already checked it out as just a crocheter, I would definitely check it out, and you'll see what I mean by the platform being super easy for crocheters, and it's also easy on the back end for designers. So I definitely recommend that platform. I also recommend Etsy because a lot of people want the PDF files of their crochet patterns so they can print them out, and I use Etsy for that, and they just get sent the digital file. You don't have to do any work when it comes to that, so that makes it super easy on Etsy as well. Now, of course, you can look into other sites if you want. Those are just the two that I have experience with, but in general, I recommend at least those two. Of course, the more platforms you have your patterns on, the more likely you are to get more sales, but also the more work it is for you to publish each one of your patterns on each one of those platforms. So just keep all of that in mind. But anyways, you guys, with all of that, we're going to get into the portion of today's video where it's going to be covering my process of designing a crochet pattern, and that is for one of my upcoming designs for this crochet draft. Okay, I'm getting started with this design, and it might seem weird to start with the arms, but I already know that I want this to be a low sew pattern. So in order to do that, I'm going to crochet the arms in. So I need to make the arms first. So that's going to be my first order of business, and I will probably have to do this a couple times just to see the right sizing. If I get lucky, it might be the first try, but it's all just trial and error with designing your own pattern. So I know that I want it to start out with brown as like the hoof, and then go into the yellow color to match the rest of the body. But otherwise, I'm just going to start crocheting and write down what I'm doing as I'm doing it. Okay, so far I like how it's working up, but I do want to do this last round a little bit different. So I'm going to just frog what I just did and redo that little part, and then continue onward. And again, it may take a couple of tries. I sort of know after designing patterns for multiple years that this is how I want something to look. So this is the stitches I need to do, and the amount of increases and the amount of decreases I need to do for it to look that specific way. But as you are just starting out, of course, it's going to take a little bit of trial and error to figure out that. Okay, already I'm not loving how this shape is, so I'm going to be frogging this to do it a little differently. Okay, so I have the first arm how I want it to look. So now I'm going to go ahead and make the second one off camera. Alright, so the two little arms are done. I am going to make a tail next that's also going to be crocheted on. And then I'm going to move on to working the legs that are going to work into the body and the head. So next is the tail, and of course it's just going to be trial and error like everything else. Alright, so next is the tail, which again might be trial and error, but we'll see. Alright, I just finished the tail as well. This took quite a bit of trial and error. Okay, so I'm starting the first leg, which is going to be worked into the body. And I am basing this off my unicorn pattern, but doing it a little bit differently because I want it to look like hooves for the bottom of the feet, instead of the unicorn, is just like legs basically. So I'm going to do a little bit more increases, I think, but I am going to do the body kind of similar to the unicorn. So yeah, I'm basing it off of that, but still making changes, of course. Alright, so here's the first leg, so I'm going to finish off and then just make the same leg again, and then of course they're worked into the body, just like my unicorn pattern is. Okay, so here's the second leg made. I'm gonna do a few rounds into the body, but then I'm going to stop there for the night because it is getting pretty late for me. So I will work on the rest of this tomorrow or the next day or just some other time in general. But I'm going to go ahead and at least do a few rounds here. Okay, so I've decided that right here is where I want to place the tail. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I already wrote out the directions for doing that within the pattern. Okay, and then now that I'm placing the tail, I decided that I wanted to put it one round above where it is currently. So like I said, trial and error. So I'm gonna do this last round where I'm placing the tail, and then I'm gonna go ahead and go to bed because like I said, it is already late for me. Alright you guys, it's quite a bit later and I said I was going to bed, but I've worked a little bit more on the body and this is what it's looking like. I'm gonna do a couple more rounds and then I think I'm going to bed. I don't know, we'll see. But I just wanted to figure out the placement for these spots as well. So I made one spot here and now I'm starting another one here. Alright, it's now the next day. I have a Bruno joining me here and I worked on this a lot longer than I should have last night, but my camera battery actually died so I didn't record very much of it. But just know it's a lot of trial and error like I've been saying a bunch. And now I'm going to go ahead and continue making the head and place the eyes and everything. And my plan is to just continue this the same way that my unicorn pattern is made. Like I said, this is based on my unicorn pattern. Just, of course, different colors and color changes and everything to look like a giraffe. But the basis of it is the same amount of stitches and everything as the unicorn pattern. So this isn't as much trial and error as originally doing the unicorn pattern was. But still trial and error for, you know, figuring out where I wanted the spots to be and everything. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and finish this up and then it will be doing the horns and the ears as well. Okay, so I just finished up the body, so now it's going to be the ears and the horn. I'm planning to do the ears the same way as the unicorn pattern as well. So I'm going to make those really quick and then I'll have to design the two little horns and sew all of that on. But I'm just going to do little ears off camera since I've already figured out that design from the previous unicorn pattern. Okay, here is the two ears. So now I'm going to go ahead and design the two little horns, which I think I have an idea of how I want to do it. So I'm going to try that first and we'll see how it looks. Like always, if it doesn't look good, then I will just frog it and try something else. But we shall see, and once I have that down how I want it, then it's just going to be sewing everything to complete it. Okay, so here's the two little horns, but now that I'm looking at it, these ears are way too small compared to the horns, so I'm going to actually redo the ears really quickly. Okay, I finished the two ears as well, and here's what the new ear looks like compared to the old ear. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these last pieces on and then I'll show you guys the final product. Alright you guys, so here is the final draft. I'm not 100% happy with it. I probably will change a few things. Normally I like to make my designs at least 2 times before I'm completely happy with it. The second time is just to finalize everything and make sure the pattern makes sense, but also maybe change a few things. Like I might change the horns a tiny bit, I'm considering, and if I do that I might change the ears to look right with the horns as well, but we'll see. But right now that is this pattern, and I hope you have enjoyed seeing the process of designing a pattern, at least my process and how I do it, and I hope you found it helpful as well. Okay, bye! Bye-bye! Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you found it helpful to hear my tips for getting started and writing up your own patterns, as well as just seeing my whole process of designing one of my own patterns. If you guys did enjoy today's video, please do give it a big thumbs up, and let me know in the comments down below what you thought of today's video. And if you guys do want to see more videos like this one, I could probably do a part 2 of other sort of tips for designing your own patterns if you guys want to see that. Or just any other videos you'd like to see from me, I would love to hear in the comment section down below from you guys. And if you want to make sure you don't miss out on any of these videos, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the post notification bell. That way you know every single time I upload a brand new video. Now if you guys do want to see more from me, you can always check out more videos of mine, my blog, my Etsy shop, my Ravelry shop, all of my social medias, and my second channel. All of that is always included in the description box of every single video for you guys. And with all of that, thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and I will see you guys here in the next one. Goodbye!